Welcome to Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni from San Francisco Bay Area. Stone's throw. Well, it's a lot of stone's throws from Emeryville, where Pixar is based. He's Will Ashton. Many people refer to him as the Good Dinosaur. You know, because you're a dinosaur when it comes to your takes, and you don't like it. Okay, fine.
So I'm prehistoric? Is that what you're trying to say?
What you can probably tell is that when Will and I talk, you're like, man, John and Will, they don't mix, you know? John's fire, Will's water, you know?
Yeah.
Well, how do you get these two in a room?
Right.
You know, you can't. They're too dangerous when put together. But maybe that's why this podcast does what it does.
You know what happens when you put those two together? You get a lot of hot air, which is what
That's right. Hot air. You're gonna be in some hot water if you stick around too long.
Yeah.
It's another Pixar movie. I think we got to start with the obvious. This is the first original Pixar movie to hit theaters since Onward was in theaters for like 20 minutes in March 2020. And we've gotten one Pixar movie in theaters since then. It was Lightyear, the kind of spin-off prequel that not a lot of people liked, including me and you. Sorry. Did you like Lightyear? I don't remember you liking it. Okay, that's what I thought.
A least favorite movie, I think.
It's my second least favorite. I still think Cars 2 is just like, I cannot sit through that movie. Lightyear I can sit through and have a decent time. I do not think that there is any like outright offensively bad Pixar movie. They're just very weak ones. And yeah, Lightyear is one of them for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the reason why I put Lightyear as the worst is because, like, to me, that's like the one Pixar movie I can't really think of many like redeeming factors other than like, yeah, the animation looks gorgeous and stuff, and just like it feels very cynical as far as like this movie. They never really could figure out like how they could justify it. It felt very much like Disney kind of being like, we need something that can guarantee a sell if you want to keep making original movies. And that one it just didn't feel like they ever figured it out in that very Pixar way.
There was so much pressure on that movie to make $1 billion.
Right.
And it was far from that. And yeah, that was kind of the end result. It's sad. But Elemental is definitely more a movie along the kind of the establishment lines of the Pixar studio, the Pixar style. We kind of have like our hidden world, like a world where things are different from ours. Very Pixar formula, you know, in terms of here are a bunch of characters, here's a lot of world building, here's a metaphor for something that the parents can talk about with their kids. This movie's been interesting because the initial critical reaction was pretty muted coming out because this premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. And, you know, it's Cannes. And people are, you know, a little bit choosy at Cannes. Sometimes you have an Inside Out where they're just like, Inside Out, I'm blowing up from the inside out. I love this movie so much. Other times, not so much. I mean, other times, I think, I can't think of a good example of another Pixar movie that was at Cannes. It might have been one of the sequels or prequels, but sorry.
Was Up at Cannes?
I don't remember. I know Up was a summer movie, so very possible. But needless to say, I mean, it just has not been... Cannes is just not that conducive to mainstream American animation, quite honestly, at least at this level.
A Lightyear was supposed to be at Cannes, and then they were like, just kidding.
But then Chris Evans was just like, to be clear, this is the Cannes Film Festival based on the real Cannes Film Festival.
The Cannes Film Festival, the toy play set that you can...
Yeah, it's a little can, just a can, not Cannes, Cannes. So this movie is also... one of the, you know, Pixar has had like a pretty consistent run of originals. Lightyear is kind of like in the middle there. Like it kind of showed up after like 3 straight originals. Those are Onward in 2020, because before Onward we had Toy Story 4 in 2019. But no, so we had Onward, and then we had Soul, the Pete Docter movie. Then we had Luca in 2021, and then we had Turning Red in 2022. And then we had Lightyear. You can just cross that off the list. And then we have Elemental. So Elemental's kind of, it's not capping off the originals because we do have another original coming out next year. That's Elio. We got some more info about that this past week. And after Elio, I think the next one after that's probably going to be Inside Out too. So we kind of have like a new sort of like era of Pixar originals that we can kind of look at. You know, the Pixar has its golden run. Right. Well, I mean, from right after Toy Story 2, you go from like Monsters, Inc. to Toy Story 3. I mean, that is just like Toy Story 2 to Toy Story 3 is, I think, the Pixar golden age. It's where they kind of just really like changed the game in terms of animation, the pop culture, like worlds that they had created. You know, it was such a successful run for the studio, maybe not financially because Pixar had to be bought by Disney at one point because they just were not making the money, but their movies were hitting audiences hard. People love Ratatouille, Incredibles, Up. It just one after the other, right? Finding Nemo to this day, one of their most successful movies. That was like a big box office success. But Pixar is an expensive place to run. And so they kind of had to go to the sequels. They kind of had to, under the Disney leadership, John Lasseter becoming creative president of Pixar and Disney for the 2010s up until he was kind of just ousted for being a creep. And then Pete Docter taking over and Ed Catmull stepping down. The 2010s were a very calamitous time for Pixar. A lot of people say that is a big decline era for Pixar because that's when we get Cars 2, that's when we get Brave, Good Dinosaur, which everybody knows John defends, and Finding Dory, Cars 3. And look, these movies aren't even bad or anything, and people come to bat for them, right? They come to bat for me, especially for like Monsters University and Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4. I mean, it just had felt like an era where, okay, you get Inside Out and Coco, and that's about it. Like, you get what you get, right? So with that in context, Wilkes, I don't think you disagree with me too much there. What's been your take on the originals, like the new era, the new class in town? Because it's not like we got to see a lot of these in the theater, so we've kind of had to just watch these on Disney Plus. It's a different thing, huh?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you're saying, like there's this Renaissance period that they have in like the like 2000s. I guess technically
when's their
maybe
enlightenment?
Yeah. They like just nonstop bangers, just like constantly, just like they cement themselves as like the like premier animation, especially because at that point, Disney was kind of on the decline. They were having like Chicken Little and Home on the Range and like Planet and these these like inferior movies compared to their 90s run. And now it kind of seems like things are maybe a little bit flipped for them now. Like kind of Disney was, now they're kind of back down a little bit because they have like Strange World, which didn't do so hot, and like Frozen 2 and whatnot. But
they at least got Encanto. That was a big success for them. But then also Ride and the Last Dragon was kind of like, okay,
right? Didn't love that. Didn't care for it. I mean, as far as Pixar is concerned. I will go to bat for Cars 2 to a mild extent. I think people are a little harsh on that one, but yeah, I mean, since that point, it does kind of seem like they have like their peaks and valleys. Like they kind of like, people, they have like harsh feelings on Monsters University as well, and like you said, Brave movies I like to some extent, but definitely lesser than the 2000s run. But then they come back with Inside Out. It's like, okay, Pixar's back. Whew, all right. And then they kind of dip again because, like you said, there's like the Good Dinosaur and stuff. And I know people didn't really care for Incredibles 2, which I really liked, I think, more than other people. But then you have Coco, where it's like, okay, classic Pixar. Also, seems like we haven't seen this kind of story from Pixar as well. It's like that happy medium.
Coco was before Incredibles 2, to be clear. So I think you're thinking of like Finding Dory was in between Inside Out, Good Dinosaur, and
Finding Dory, not really that crazy about, but in any case, you have these originals, which are all, like you said, like I really like Soul, I really like Turning Red, I like Luca as well. Like these really solid, lovely movies, and like especially in the case of like Soul and Luca, and I guess even Turning Red, like the animation is a little bit different than what we expect from Pixar, but it has that classic format. It really, of all the movies that had to be pushed onto Disney Plus, given obviously the unfortunate circumstances around it, like those ones, it was just so painful to see like really solid, good like films from Pixar just kind of get put on the service kind of coldly. And now we have these two new Pixar movies that are, thankfully in theaters again, but it's also like these two Pixar movies are the ones I'm kind of like, well, if there are any kind of Pixar movies I'd rather be watching at home, I would say it's probably Lightyear and maybe even Elemental. Like it doesn't, I feel like I'm not getting as much compared to the originals before this, but I don't want to jump ahead too much.
Yeah. We'll talk about Elemental here in a sec, but just good to get that little bit of a read because, to this day, I really want to see the Luca and Turning Red in particular on the big screen. Those have been my two favorites of this like new era. Soul, I do think it actually holds up pretty well on a rewatch, but yeah, Turning Red, I just think it was like, man, this is, I think, Pixar cooking at its best. And Luca is just that movie is just like a comfort movie for me. I love just like existing in that movie, especially with the soundtrack. But yeah, it's definitely not been their golden era. It hasn't been their renaissance, but it has, it's kind of just been like, okay, here are some like really solid movies, a bunch of like movies that are like comparable with some of the best ones. But also I think, I do think like Onward, for example, I do wonder how that movie would have played out if things had been different and it had like a more serious theatrical run. But we don't have to play in the past. We don't have to play in what ifs. The only what if I want to play is, well, what if elements had feelings? Fire, water, earth, and air. Long ago the four elements lived together in harmony, and then everything changed when Pixar attacked.
Gonna do an Avatar Last Airbender thing. I
wasn't sure you were gonna get it. You've only watched one episode.
Yeah, I saw the Last Airbender movie. I'm up to speed. I got the gist. I said that. Well, to hurt you a little bit.
Yeah. The psychological damage on me this time, huh? No, there's a couple firsts going on here for Pixar. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is kind of the first like full on like romantic comedy that I think they're trying to do. You could argue Toy Story 4 kind of has like some rom-com stuff in it, but I don't think that's the main engine of that movie. And you could also say that WALL-E is a bit of a romantic comedy, but I think that movie is just so much more grand and operatic that it kind of transcends that. This movie is a little bit more like plain about it. There are two movies that I think that, or three movies that the makers of Elemental say that they're kind of like drawing upon for their like New York City kind of immigrant story, kind of mixed with like an unlikely romance. That's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the 80s or the 60s version, Moonstruck, which I watched for the first time last year, and I thought was very, very lovely and nice, and Amelie as well.
No, I just saw Amelie for the first time like a month or so ago.
Look at that. We did our research and we were even trying. But in this world, we have anthropomorphic elements of nature. There are four kinds that we see in this. If there's going to be a sequel, it would probably be like even more, right? It would be like I don't know. I'm not good at thinking of elements. Metal, what are the metal ones? Like we could see them. Where's the lightning people? But they all kind of coexist in this world. The setup is that it's Element City. So think Zootopia, basically, where it's like a whole city sort of built around like the elements. However, you can kind of tell that really it's like a place for water people, right? Because things are made of glass and things are more conducive to how they live. And the immigrants in this story are the fire people, right? So we kind of see like a couple, one of them's pregnant. Do not ask us questions about how pregnancy and childbirth works in the elemental world, because of many things. It is not something that has, I think, an answer and an explanation. You kind of just have to go with it.
I mean, the rule rule 34 or whatever for this movie. I never want to look into those things, and I imagine they're gonna have their work cut out for them, and
I do feel bad for the parents whose like kids are just going to be like, but mommy, what? How did they have relations? That's how kids talk, right?
Yeah.
But no, so we follow the fire people because they live in sort of like their own like district, their own sort of like immigrant district outside of the main part of the city, because they're kind of hated by the other elements. Maybe, and not even just hated, but it's just more sort of like annoying. They're annoying to them because fire can put out, or not put out water, but like extinguish fire or water. And, soil, earth creatures, like fire kind of touches them. Their leaves all burn up and stuff. It's very cute. We mainly follow this young fire person named Ember. And she is trying to decide, or she's trying to take over her dad's business. But she's trying to like deal with her temper. She gets very mad. She blows up, a little bit like anger from Inside Out, right? And she's not good with people. Like in the store, like the customers come up and they're just they're very annoying, and she is sort of like how am I gonna prove to my dad that I can be nice and I can take care of things and he can retire, blah blah blah. She eventually comes into contact with Wade, who's voiced by, and hopefully I'm not butchering his name, Mamoudou Athie. Ember, by the way, voiced by Leah Lewis from, what was that? The half of it was that movie she was in?
Oh, is that her?
I think that was her, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the half of it. Netflix film from a few years back. I think we talked about it on the show.
Yeah, I like that.
Mamoudou Athie, he was in a Netflix show called Archive 81, and we saw him pretty recently last year in Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah, he was also in the other Netflix movie. Wasn't he in Uncorked?
Yeah, I didn't see that, where he's like a sommelier.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's all right.
So Wade is like a city inspector, and they come into contact because essentially the business is there's like all these water leaks, and that's not good because of fire people. The movie kind of becomes like, okay, there's like a little bit of a romance going on between Wade and Ember, but there's also sort of like a city planning dispute. It's very weird, right? Like the movie is kind of sort of like, oh, she's got to save the business. And it's like, oh, this wall. It's like, it's kind of like an episode of Bob the Builder a little bit. And I was watching it and I was like, okay, are they going to do the Zootopia thing? They already are to a huge extent. They're kind of, it's sort of an allegory. It's a metaphor for racism and for interracial, sort of things. Although Zootopia wasn't really about romance, but it was sort of about like accepting each other. And, there was stuff in there about how systemic racism works. So like, even if you're not like mean to somebody in a racist way, racism is something that exists apart from that. I mean, it's something that like a whole society can kind of be built to disenfranchise people. And this movie has that. Kind of, right? Because it's sort of like, the fire people are out in this like little area and they're being negatively affected, but it doesn't go all the way with it, right? So
sure.
Not to jump ahead a little bit, but this movie had potential. It really, like, I think that they could have they were like 2 or 3 like revisions on the script, I think, from having something pretty compelling. Mm-hmm. And instead, I just think that this feels like an early draft, that they just kind of kept going with it. And it makes me wonder if like Pixar has kind of, the brain trust is still pretty intact, but I just wonder if, this is Peter Sohn, who directed The Good Dinosaur. He's been with Pixar a long time. I just kind of wonder if they've sort of become a little bit more like schedule oriented. And not like we got to make it right no matter how long it takes. It's more sort of like we got to movie after movie after movie. I'm pretty disappointed in this one because I think of how much potential it has, and I want to get your read on it. But I'll say, to be clear, there are some people who are coming to bat for this movie and just being like, nonsense. This movie's terrific. Pick one of Pixar's best movies. I've seen critics come out and say this is like one of the best Pixar movies they've ever seen, and I'm just like, man, I wish I was there. I wish that was where I'm at. But I don't know. What do you think, Will? Are you on the same page, or are you a little nicer? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit in our Spider-Verse review. Like, when you see the trailer for this movie, it almost kind of looks like a parody of a Pixar movie. Like, it has like all like the formulaic hallmarks of those kind of films, but like the world doesn't seem as fleshed out. It seems like inventive, but also weirdly kind of familiar. It's not as kind of fleshed out and grand as like you expect. It kind of has almost like a DreamWorks kind of quality in that way, where it's like getting the blueprint, but maybe not getting all the ingredients in the stew. But yeah, I mean, I think going into it, certainly I'm like, putting that aside, like I just really want this movie to work. Like obviously, as you've been saying, it's been a little bit since we've seen an original Pixar movie in theaters. You just want this one to be a winner. It has everything you expect from a Pixar movie on paper. You think you can be a very easy, and I think this is a very like personal, heartfelt movie for Peter Sohn, the director and writer. But yeah, I mean, I think watching it, it's just odd that like the things that Pixar usually does really well seem a little off here, missing. Like you said, like usually they're very good about taking some things that can be a little bit complex or kind of busy, but like simplifying in a way that doesn't contrite the narrative, but also makes it easy to follow and understand. This one is weirdly kind of convoluted as far as the story is concerned. It's also kind of loose narrative. So like you said, like the Zootopia thing, like I think Zootopia has its problems as well, has similar issues, but that movie, I think you're more willing to forgive it because you're invested in the characters, you understand them very well. You also have a pretty tight plot, a pretty, well-paced film. And so like the stuff you're thinking about, like, well, I don't know if that really works. I don't know if that technically count. Like the racial metaphor of it is kind of messy, but you don't really think about it as much until afterwards. Whereas this one, because there's not as much going into it, you know where it's going to go. You can see the beats coming. In some respects, you're kind of just like, you're thinking a lot more about that, and you're kind of just like, well, I don't know, like, how does this world really work? And like, how does this metaphor really work? Especially considering that, like it obviously, there's a sense of like the fire elements are like they're meant to be like Asian, but they're also supposed to be like Eastern European. They're supposed to be, I think, Jewish a little bit. And it's like it's not like they're trying to keep it vague and open, but it also feels kind of weird that they like aren't very specific at the same time. Like, I don't know if they're just trying not to be offensive or what was going on with that. But
well, they even have like a language, and it's kind of like, and the language kind of evokes like some like Middle Eastern stuff. So it's almost kind of clumsy in like the things it chooses to be specific about.
And they're called Firish, so it's like kind of like also supposed to be like Irish immigrants in some respect. So yeah, I don't know, I was a little confused about that, but like I think like even like the story kind of feels a little haphazard about like the way our two characters meet feel a little kind of rushed and didn't really like, it just kind of feels hap-on and like
it's not a good meet cute.
Yeah, and also like the motivations of the character kind of just like fly by, and then like there's like this thing that's like, oh, we have to go to a sporting event in order to like talk to this person, and like, why, like who? And like it just kind of seems like they wrote like this set piece into the film, and like they had to kind of figure out a way to keep that in there because they did so much work, and like you said, that they had a schedule kind of maintain, and so like stuff like that, like it feels a lot more like the stuff I don't usually think about with Pixar, where it's just like, okay, like they have these things and that, like they flow very naturally, very organically in the story. This, it doesn't feel as organic, doesn't feel like it flows as well. It feels a little clunky in that respect. And it feels like the stuff that I usually expect them to really flesh out and expand upon, like the world building and the characters, like they're fine. They're like, it's interesting, but it doesn't feel as like vibrant and huge as you'd normally expect from a film like this one from Pixar.
I do want to say the things that I like about this movie for sure. So I think, it's Pixar. Visually, I think that they totally nail it. I think that this was an art style and kind of a departure from what they've done before in the right ways, where it's sort of evolving the Pixar house style without trying to be gimmicky, without trying to, push the envelope or do something different for the sake of it. And they've done this a lot with their movies. I had a little bit of an online moment this past week when I saw this like kind of discourse going on about how all Pixar movies look the same. And I just think that that's like nonsense. I think that we think of that because Disney movies and a lot of animated movies try to copy Pixar. And it's like they're trying to copy it in the way that they think Pixar sort of pays attention to details. And I don't think that that's the case at all. I think Pixar is really good about the little things, and that's what kind of rounds out their movies. It's not just the art design, which is always usually really well thought out, but a lot of it is the detail. It's the lighting, it's the way that they weave in the world building to an extent. Like in this movie, the things I like for sure are actually just sort of seeing the characters use the idea that they are elements as part of the mechanics of their world. Particularly Ember, who can like make glass and she can like do certain things in her environment in order to get around. Like a lot of that stuff was fun to watch for sure. I think it just, for me, it really is just the story. I think the story is something that is missing some really key ingredients to make it all work. It's missing that connection between what is it about this setting? What is it about the world they live in that informs the immigrant story? And I see the piece of it. Like I kind of see what they maybe had in mind, but didn't quite bring to the page, because there's a clear sort of like commentary here about how Ember and her family are kind of on the outs. They're sort of victims of a place that wasn't made for them, a place that isn't accommodating to them. And when that's sort of like an external conflict, right? And usually Pixar is really good at like, here's the external conflict, here's the internal conflict. And this movie is good at the internal stuff because it's, you have Ember trying to figure out, like quite literally, like she has an internal conflict about what she wants to do with her life. And the drama between her and her father, who's voiced by Ronnie del Carmen, longtime story artist for Pixar, that stuff is very compelling. But then I think you see where the movie is kind of like disappearing into itself when it comes to the dynamic between her and Wade and how that works and why their romance exists. And it's one-sided to me. You can see why Ember has a thing for him. The movie puts attention on that. It's like she sees him as more go with the flow. He kind of cools her off. That stuff is very elegantly said. Of like, here is why she would be drawn to this person, this water person, because even though he's like her total opposite, it's in a way where they complement each other. The problem is that the movie doesn't turn that around enough to see like, well, okay, what does Wade see in her? And it just kind of lacks that same sort of like characterization and growth for him. And that's what I mean is like, that's where the external conflict can come into place, because he literally represents a part of society that has put her sort of on the fringes her whole life. And the movie never quite reckons with that, even with its whole thing of like, they try to fix a wall together and, you know, by a fluke, it doesn't work. And like the constructs of the plot, I mean, that's what it's missing. It's missing sort of like, here's why we're here kind of a thing. It's something that I do think that Zootopia did well. And maybe people can argue about how, like, you know, the difference being Zootopia has a villain, you know, and part of the reason that's, I think, good is because there is like sort of a conspiracy behind it. There's a sort of like a way for the characters to sort of look at, these are the situations and the circumstances, blah, blah, blah. Here's how we're going to deal with it. And Elemental is just a little bit more of like, let's just get through this. Love conquers all. And that's about it. It's very surface level to me. So I think that kind of sums up why the story just does not, for me, Will, it's a little wet, a little flat.
Yeah, it's a little fluid, I guess, because it feels like you said before, like it has a story that you can tell. Like I think they had like a lot of revisions. Like there are a lot of things they were like incorporating from other versions of the script and putting in there, but I think it kind of needed like that final, I don't know, like final draft revision where it streamlined this, like you said, maybe added a character to be more central in the third act to kind of give it a little more of a structure or something. Like it makes it a little bit more concrete.
Yeah, giving Wade or somebody in Wade's family a little bit more of like flaws that carry into what happens in the third act. Like, for example, like there's no sort of like reckoning with Wade as a person who, you know, and I'm not trying to rewrite the movie or anything, but he's a person who goes with the flow so much that he doesn't understand what she goes through and really takes her seriously. But the movie never allows him to sort of be like a bad person, or to have that kind of like moment.
Yeah, I saw Matt Singer described that character as a manic pixie dream puddle, I think was what he said.
Yeah. He's a wet blanket. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it does seem like something crucial is missing with that character. I'm not quite sure why he feels kind of just flowy and loose in this, but yeah.
And he can be, but it's just like the movie doesn't let that be part of the story. It's just sort of like an aside. It's just sort of like, here he is. Because you even have like stuff happening in the movie where he kind of like shows up and tries to be like, you know, he has his big speech or whatever. And again, it's like, I don't know, it's missing some sort of like everything coming together kind of moment. And you feeling like, where is the subversive message in this? Now, it does have kind of a subversive like message in the sense of like, what causes our temper, you know, like what makes us angry. And there were times in the movie where I was like, okay, that's an interesting thought. Is that true though? And I'm kind of curious because I psychology was my minor. I'm not going to pretend like I'm some kind of expert, but I don't know if that is always like a very like reliable, helpful thing to tell people of like your anger is you trying to tell yourself something. I find it interesting, but I just don't know if it's like, if the movie's being a little bit too binary about that.
Yeah, you might get yourself in some trouble if you kind of follow that logic too closely, maybe. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I was thinking that same thing too when I was watching. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's a nice thought, but I don't know if that really flows.
I can see, because I think I've had times where I think like my temper is a symptom of something, or it's like, you know, if I've gotten really angry about something, there's usually something underneath it, but there's a sort of almost like it's me trying to tell myself. I don't know. I don't know if that's totally accurate.
No, I mean, I think like a better way to kind of get the same thing is like it seems like your anger is hiding something. Like it's not like trying to say something else. It's or you know what I mean. Like it seems like they like the thought makes sense, but it's not quite clear. Like it like I think he's like I think there's a way to kind of tackle something similar, but make it a little bit more authentic.
We should point out our mutual best friend is in this movie, Joe Pera, big screen debut.
I'm so excited.
I didn't have the heart to tell you that he doesn't have a lot of lines in this.
Sure.
That's why I didn't warn you. I just wanted you to sit in the movie theater and still have that, that ray of hope in your life for a minute. But it sounds like you still really liked what he's doing here.
Oh, I think he's so funny in this. I think his last line in particular, the way he delivers his last line.
It's very Will Ashton. It's literally something you have said on this podcast.
I was getting there, yeah. I was going to think, not only is it so funny, so well delivered, but it proves that Joe Pera is an OG Cinemaholics fan.
There you go. He remembers that era. I do like the music in this. It's Thomas Newman, who is... Say again?
No, just imagining Joe Pera saying Maverick Hines.
Maverick. No, Thomas Newman, of course, composer of many great films, but in Pixar world, he's done a lot of the ones with Andrew Stanton in the past, like Finding Nemo and WALL-E and stuff. It's just tough. It's one of those movies again where I think like the technicals are there as you would expect. I guess one thing I'm kind of wondering is like why do you think this movie is getting kind of a sort of like, hey, it's actually really good, what are you talking about, from people? Like what do you think that's about? Like what do you think it is about this movie that is I guess polarizing or divisive, or is there something about I can kind of see maybe the immigrant story hitting people maybe harder than it hit me, even though my parents were kind of immigrants. Like they came to America, they didn't know English. Puerto Rico is a territory, so they weren't immigrants in a legal sense, but they had an immigrant like experience. So I'm that kind of generation. I'm like Ember, although I'm not the firstborn. So I've kind of been in situations like this, but I guess I'm a little bit different because my immigrant, like in quotes, kind of experience has been not like very similar to this at all. So I don't quite relate with it personally, but I could see other people that being the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see people like really respond. Like it has a very like Monsters Inc. or Inside Out kind of type world, and it feels very like inspired and colorful, and it has like something that is both kind of like a return to basics, but also something that feels kind of new for Pixar. Like you said, like a romantic comedy, almost like kind of like a screwball comedy at times, style that I could see people really responding to. And it's one of those things that's like, if it was better, I think I would really get with this movie's wavelength. But
it's wavelength, you say?
Yeah. I kind of regretted saying that as soon as I said it. But no, I think it's a film that it's just disappointing to me because it has all the hallmarks of a Pixar movie, but it feels clumsy in a way that they're usually not clumsy. And so it's just a little baffling, and it's just disappointing. I
said in my review, it feels more like a Pixar short, in the sense that usually the Pixar shorts don't have, they usually only scratch the surface of their worlds, right?
Yeah, like the Night and Day one.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, when you extend it out into a feature and you have to like fill in all the blanks, that's kind of how this comes across to me. I liked, for example, Isaac Feldberg wrote in his Cannes review, because he saw this there. He said that it kind of just reminded him of like concept art, but like they made a movie based on the concept art without like really figuring out the script. And that makes sense to me, because it does seem like they were really excited by how this world could be, and like exploring it and doing all of that. Because I mean, obviously it looks really good, and watching the different characters, like there's like a little bit of like middle school science stuff going on in this movie. That's like, it's cool. But then there's also like a lack of exploration. We're in a lot of the same locations in this movie. We don't really get to hang out with the earth and air elements a ton and kind of see what their lives are.
Yeah. Outside of like Joe Pera's character and like the one Cloud character.
Claude?
Really,
Claude. No, the kid. Yeah. There's But yeah, Catherine O'Hara, or not Catherine O'Hara, she plays the mom of Wade. But Gail is played by Wendi McLendon-Covey. Sorry.
Yeah, it just feels oddly kind of lacking in that same way we're talking about with like with with our central like main love interest. It just seems like like they have the stuff there, the elements, if you will, but like they're not really explored that deeply. Whether it's because they were explored earlier and they just didn't really fit into the narrative or what, it just it just kind of comes across a little lacking.
Yeah, I do appreciate that at least the voice cast is like they weren't just going for like big names. Like they actually found people I think where the voices like really match. Like I think they did a great job with the casting there. It's so tough because like I want to grade this movie higher. I think because so much of it is like really like I think like top notch. But I guess I've talked about this before. I think when it comes to story and the way that all those things sync up, that's something that I tend to just prioritize as a critic. And so it kind of comes off for me as like, it's not going to really, I don't know if this is going to really stand the test of time. I do hope that like if they came back to this world, maybe did a sequel, had more time with it. I don't know. On the same token, I'd rather they just make another original. And I think their next movie looks pretty interesting, a little promising. Something they haven't really done before, but yeah.
I mean, I feel really bad like not liking this for a number of reasons, but one is yesterday I was actually, when I was getting out of the Flash, I saw that Peter Sohn had like a handwritten note he put out. I don't know if you saw this, where he was like talking about like, this is like a love letter to my parents.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
It was like, like when they go to the movies together, like his mom would often need him or like maybe one of their siblings or something to translate the film, but like with animation they never had that, and so like this movie is like a way of like making a movie for them, and I guess they passed away during the making of the film. I think there's a little tribute at the very end, so it's like it's a very heartfelt film, and you can tell it really put his his heart into it, but just so when it comes out it's kind of like a middle of the road Pixar movie. Is just like, man, like just a bummer.
It's such a bummer. It really is. I don't know. This kind of seems like it might be a flop. It has a big budget, $200 million. And I'm going to double check the box office, but the Thursday previews were pretty low, 2.3 million, which is, I mean, it's not like abnormally low for an original Pixar movie, and it's on a Thursday, but it doesn't look great. It's tracking, I think, for only like a $35 million opening weekend. And yeah, it's summer. It's kind of gonna be hard for them to make that up. Honestly, I think they probably would have been better suited releasing this in the spring, when there's a little bit less competition and kids aren't at camp, stuff like that, or in November when you have like Thanksgiving. And I think this would have probably been better suited for that kind of release. But
I mean, if they released this in the spring, they would have to compete with Super Mario Brothers, and I mean, I don't know if that would have.
That's true. That would have been tough. They would have had to release in like March, and I think like right before Super Mario, and then maybe have the Mario boost. But yeah, it would have been tough either way. November, I think we're getting. I don't remember what we're getting animation wise, but I know we're getting.
Wish.
That's right. And then we also have like we have a big Marvel movie, but yeah, I think this might have been better slated, honestly, for that part of the year. But we I think like the last time we got a Pixar movie in November, December was Soul. But that, obviously not a theatrical run.
But Good Dinosaur was like a Thanksgiving release, right?
Yeah, but that was way before Soul.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that flopped, so.
Coco, Good Dinosaur was a flop, but Coco came out around that time and was a big hit. So it kind of, it just depends on the movie. All right, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game, Elemental, and I'm very curious, Will, how you're going to do on this one, because it's Pixar. How do you guess? I mean, I know people are looking at this movie and they're like, why would I watch Elemental when Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, is on the horizon?
It's just 2 weeks away.
I can wait. All right, we have 156 reviews counted. One of them's mine. Will Ashton, Will the Thrill. What do you think the critic score is?
It's a good question. I think it's in the 70s, but I'm not quite sure where. I'm going to say split down the middle, 75%.
Well, Ashton, you're dead on. Where did this come from?
Whoa.
And it's because we played the Rotten Tomatoes game earlier with Flash, and so you're warmed up. Okay. Audience score, we have 250 plus verified ratings. What do you got?
think it's going to be high. I think the initial response, based on the audience I saw with, though, it seemed like some of the younger kids in my theater got a little scared. At certain moments. I don't know how your audience responded to it, but I think generally, I think they're going to be like, yeah, it was cute, it was nice. So I think they'll give it like high, but not like astoundingly high, like maybe like an 82.
Higher, 91%.
Oh,
Look at
okay.
that. Yeah. Audiences are taking one look at Elemental, and they're saying like, I'm going mental for this movie.
Did you see this movie in 3D or 2D? I forgot to ask.
2D.
Okay, I saw it in 3D.
The screenings are almost always 2D. I think the only exception was Avatar: Way of Water.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was surprised my screening was in 3D.
Yeah, this movie probably kind of slaps on 3D, to be honest. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I would say if you're gonna see it, it actually looks pretty good in 3D.
That's good to know. Okay, what about cinema score? What did the folks in Vegas have to say about Elemental? What you got, Will?
Oh boy, it feels like a real B plus.
No, it's an A.
All right.
I'm telling you, I think that look, the folks are taking one look at us and they're being like, all right, John and Will, they're doing their thing. They're being a bit negative, but what do they know? I love this movie, says I think more people. But the thing is that going to translate to box office? Is it going to translate to word of mouth?
You can
I don't know.
count on Vegas. You can always count on Vegas to bet on love.
Yeah. I mean, there is, like you said, the Super Mario Brothers thing of the spring, but I mean, right now you have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
You have, you do have big movies coming out. You have Transformers, and it does feel like a little bit of a crowded. I mean, we were talking about The Flash. This would have been our main review if it wasn't for like The Flash, right? Like it just seems like a weird release time, but okay.
Also, doesn't Disney usually spread out their releases? Like they only do like one a month. Like they're doing this like 2 weeks before Indiana Jones.
That's true. Indiana Jones is hitting June 30, so it's kind of bizarre. And I guess they think that the that the cross promotion or the audiences are different, but I don't know. Weird summer box office so far. But okay, it's Elemental. And Letterboxd. I forgot Letterboxd. So sorry. It only has 8.5 thousand watches on Letterboxd. I mean, compare that to The Flash. The Flash had 70,000 when we did it, the review, coming out the same day. I mean, it's just like a fraction.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think the average rating is? You think it's gonna be higher than The Flash was?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to say 3.3.
It's a little bit higher, 3.5.
Okay.
So Price of Right's rules, you did okay, but friends of the show alike they're kind of different on this. I'm seeing lots of 3s, 3.5s, 4s. Friend of the show, Emma Sasick, I think she saw it at Cannes. She gave it 5 stars. And then but then you have other folks like Isaac Feldberg I mentioned before who gave it 2 stars. So there's a bit of a range on this one. But hey, what are you going to think about the movie, listener? As always, you can let us know. Our email is open. We haven't gotten an email in a while. It's because I never mention it. cinemaholics@gmail.com if you want to hit us up. And also, we have a Discord on the In Between Drafts Discord. You can hang out with the Cinemaholics there. We're usually chatting, doing whatever. Will's not usually there. I mean, you're there, but you're usually more of a haunt.
Yeah, I'm there in spirit. But no, I was going to say Carl's date. Should we talk about that real quick?
Didn't like it.
I thought it was fine.
I didn't think it was. It didn't make me laugh. I know some people made them cry. It was a nothing to me. I didn't think it was well written. I like the concepts, but it just I don't know. It didn't really do anything. It felt a little bit like it was trying to do the Up thing again, and I don't know. Maybe it's because to me it just feels like that story is complete, and I don't want to go back to it.
Sure.
So that was a little bit like, all right. Up it came out 14 years ago.
Right.
Like it's a little, I don't know.
Yeah, you could tell in Bob Pearson's voice for Doug. Like it's been 14 years.
I'm a squirrel. Yeah, there's a little bit of an exasperation to it. I mean, Doug is cool. I mean, I like Doug. I like Bad Asner. Hey, he's the GOAT. But yeah.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? For me is like, I think overall the short, I guess I'm more charitable in the sense like I didn't hate it. I thought it was just kind of, it was fine. Definitely lower than your average Pixar short standards. And
For
I
sure.
felt like it was kind of just like, I thought it was leading up to something more like a punchline.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like some sort of thing, like, he gets the date and whatever, it's like a dog or something, and then like dog.
You had that thought too, where it was like, oh, maybe he was talking to a dog. That would have been funny.
Yeah, I mean something like some joke, but then just like, oh no, it's just okay. It's just what
just goes to the.
Right. But no, I mean, I do think I wasn't expecting Ed Asner to reprise his role because obviously, unfortunately, he passed away. So I was like, oh, they probably someone else to do it. So when I actually heard Ed Asner, it genuinely kind of warmed my heart. I was like, oh, is Ed Asner again?
Yeah.
So I thought that was nice. But yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, I ended up watching it 1.5 times because there was an issue with the projector where it wasn't playing 3D properly, and I feel like even watching it once was fine. Like I didn't need to, see it that many times. But yeah, I don't know. If you make it to the theater on time to see it, I don't think it's you'll think it's whatever. I think.
All right. Well, next week we're hoping to cover off No Hard Feelings and or Past Lives. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But for now, we're heading out. So from the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wesh.
See you next time.